Hello and welcome to another Oasys Top Tips. Did you know that you can use and create reporter variables in THIS? Today I'm going to show you how you can create variables in THIS and use them in Reporter, and also how you can use reporter variables in your THIS FastTCF scripts in a THIS reporter item. So I've got a model loaded in, and I'm just going to look at some node data and just extract the displacements of the first node of the model, x, y, z, and the resultants. Next, I'm going to start a linked reporter session by clicking on the reporter button at the top. And I'm just going to select the 16:9 executive landscape template. Now I'm going to snap reporter to the side and THIS to the left. We can see here that the first page has some placeholder items and text boxes and things. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to select the placeholder item and then resize the image so that it fits the same as the placeholder. Then I'm going to blank off the displacement magnitude and capture the graph. And we can see that appearing in Reporter. Now, if I look in the variables, I'll see that we actually have two variables already created for us. And these belong to item 1, and it says all curves max y and all curves min y, as well as the values and the description here. So by default, when you capture a graph this way, you get these two outputs. But we can actually customize these and add our own variables back in THIS. So if we close this and then click on the Show Variables button in the Reporter tab, we'll see that that window will undock, and we'll see there's existing variables on that item 1, as well as the option to create new variables. To make it a bit easier to see, I'm just going to maximize THIS, and then I'm going to change these values here. So I'm going to select them to be specific to the curves X, Y, and I'll create a new one, and it's by default given us the next one Z, and I'm going to set these all to max, which will be the maximum Y value. And then here I have the option to set the variable name, so these are the default ones it presents me with. And note that these are reporter variables, so they can't have any spaces or illegal characters. And also it's not case sensitive, but Reporter will send it to uppercase. So I'm just going to describe this as max X. Here is max Y, and this is the Z displacement, so max Z. Leave the descriptions as they are. And I'm also just going to turn on the labels here. So that will create an additional reporter variable, which is the variable name, and then with underscore label appended to the end. Then at this point, I need to make sure that I don't click reload, I need to click update. What that's going to do is essentially going to recapture the graph and send the update across to Reporter. However, just before I do that, I need to remember that what I've done is I've actually changed the window size. So I've stretched this image, and so I need to click resize so that it then regrabs the old size, and then I can click update. And now when I move THIS across and open up the variables, I can see there's new variables created as well as the old ones that have persisted. And note that all these variables created in this way are given temporary status, which means that we can clear them by clicking on the variables and then delete temporary variables here. Now I'm going to maximize Reporter and just create a new page. For this purpose, I'm just going to duplicate the page and then click off and click on this item, and I'm going to use the convert into method and just create a table here. I'm going to give that 4 rows and 3 columns, and then I'm going to give it the name curve displacement and unit. We know they're all in millimeters, and then I can use Control I here. I can just grab the value, so we see those labels have created. So max underscore x underscore label, and then here I'll just go max x, Control I, same for the y. Ooh, I overwrote it here. I'll just paste that one in there. Max z label, z value, and then click OK. We can see those all created there. And then I'm just going to slightly change the layout, so center everything and increase the font size a little bit to 18, and then also I'm going to add a border. Now when I press P, you'll see that those values have been updated. Just as an aside, you can also customize the formatting of these text fields here. So if I just want 2 decimal places, I'll type 2F in all of these, and it will change the formatting of those number fields to be 2 decimal places. Next, I might want to get the resultant displacement of this node here. Now I could of course create a JavaScript item to square all of these values and sum them and then take the root to get the resultant. However, I'm going to show you how you can also do that via THIS. So if we come back to the first page and then we move it across to the right hand side now, I'm just going to redock this. I'm now going to create a new graph, so I'll click on graphs and just copy from graph 1, creating a new graph, and then come back to Reporter and make sure that I have a new item selected on page 1. What I can do is then I can go to the curves and toggle onto graph 2 and then turn on just the displacement magnitude here, and then back to Reporter. I'm going to show variables and toggle to graph 2, and we can see we have the displacement magnitude here, which we can set to max, and then I only need 1, so I'm just going to cancel that and just call that the resultant, and then resultant, and I don't need the variable name this time. So now what I need to do is capture this, and it will create a new item here, but actually I didn't really want the graph image, I just want the value. So what I can do is select the item and then just turn this to blank, and so what's going to happen is it will just extract the value from this node and save it in the resultant variable. So if we have a look here, we'll now see our new resultant variable there. I'm just going to make this a bit smaller now, so just 10 by 10, move it out of the way because it's not a graph item anymore, it's just a THIS item. I'm now going to go back to THIS and I'm going to show you how I can actually use that resultant variable to change the title here of graph 1. So first I'll make sure I'm selecting the right item, graph 1, so that's highlighted here. I'll then resize it just so that it's matching the same size as before. And then I'm going to double click on the title and I'm going to change this to displacement of node, and then I've actually copy and pasted the number there for the node ID 10175835 resultant, just saying I wanted to provide information of the resultant displacement equals, and this is where the magic happens, I can actually put a reporter variable in here, resultant in the percentage symbols, and then it's in millimeters here. Press enter and then close that down, and that's overwritten. And notice at the moment what we have is that resultant variable there with the percentage symbols. But when I capture this and send that across to THIS, it's actually overwritten the fastTCF script such that the reporter variable is present. So if I scroll down, I can actually see that here. And so when I reload this, you'll watch the resultant name change to the value of resultant that we've already captured. You can also manually edit the fastTCF script yourself. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a variable. I'm just going to edit and I'm just going to call it node ID. And then I've actually already got that value copied and pasted there. So that's the ID of the node. And I'm going to look in the script here. I'm just going to find where that appears. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm just only going to replace it in one location. But you could of course replace them everywhere, but I'll show you a little trick. So if I replace that there and click OK, and then what I need to do is I need to reload that script, so it'll overwrite that value. When I click capture, what's going to happen now is I'll get a pop-up which is telling me that the script used to have some reporter variables in it, and it's asking if I want to replace those with the reporter values or with the hard-coded numbers. In this case, I do want to replace them with the reporter variables so that this fastTCF script is generic. So if I click yes, a pop-up window will appear, and you'll see that some of the rows have been highlighted. So it's all automatically figured out that previously I used node ID and resultant. And at this point, if there were other variables you also wanted to replace, You could hold down Shift and click on them as well, and it would try and find matching those strings and replacing them. However, in this case, I just want to replace those two, so I'll click OK. And now if I double click here and look in the FastTCF script, we'll see that everywhere that node appeared, it's actually been replaced. And now what we can do is we can actually change the node ID here. So I'm just going to add a text item. I'm going to give it node ID as the value up there. So when I press P, you can see the node ID. And even THIS, what I do is I look at other nodes available to us. So here's one 101.80679. I can actually go into the variables, edit this, and change the node ID here, 101.80679. And we can see that that's changed there. And now, when I either reload or the same thing as to regenerate here, I'll reload that item into here, and you'll watch that the node ID changes. And so now we're actually extracting the data from a different node. But notice the resultant hasn't changed. And that's because what we've done is we're still using that resultant variable value, and we haven't actually updated it or changed its definition. So to do the whole thing, what we need to do is we need to come and edit this THIS item, which, remember, it doesn't output a graph, but does output the resultant displacement. And we need to find the node here and replace it with the node ID. And then for completeness, we actually need this to run before the graph runs. So we can see the order is 1 and then 2. We need to right click on this and send it to back so that it runs first. And what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to delete the temporary variables. So we can see those have all cleared out, but the node ID has remained because that's not temporary, it's one we wanted. And so if I generate the page now, or generate the whole report, we'll see that it will update it with the correct new resultant displacement. And you can see that here. Just check that the resultant displacement is 890.344. And notice when I generated that, it didn't actually change these graphs here because generating was doing a different process. So if I wanted to update them, I need to select them individually. And then in this case, I've actually changed the order. So it's item number 2. You can see it's selected here. And then I would need to reload that in here. We can now see that the resultant displacement's changed. So that's been a quick overview of reporter variables and specifically using them alongside THIS, so getting them out from THIS and using them in reporter, and then also using them back in another THIS graph via the FastTCF scripts. So I hope you found that useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next Oasys Top Tips.